Welcome back to Mission 43's Education Discovery Series, where we talk about popular career paths and the education to get you there. Well, I want to hear a little bit more about your background. So tell me about your military experience and then how you got to be where you are today.
Okay, well, it's kind of a long story. I'll try and condense it a little bit. I had kind of a roundabout way of getting into cybersecurity. It's not your traditional route. I always was interested in computers and always had that since I was a kid. I had my first laptop when I was about 13, and it was the old monochrome screen, you know, and it was really interesting comparative to nowadays, but you know, it was one of those things I always like to take things apart and figure things out. So that kind of carried with me throughout my life. I started off in the military right out of high school. I was in the Marine Corps Reserves, and I did communications. I was a radio operator, and eventually got out of the reserves and decided to go into law enforcement. And I did that for a while, but I always kind of wanted to get back in the military and kind of do some of the fun stuff I always enjoyed. And the National Guard gave me an opportunity to do IT. And still do that on the part-time side while I did my law enforcement thing. That eventually came into a longer career that I got an opportunity in 2014. I was shoulder tapped to be a part of this cyber thing. Nobody knew what this cyber thing was. They said, you know, you're kind of good at IT, you kind of like computers, and we're going to start this new program, this new branch. So I said, well, that sounds pretty exciting. And I jumped on board, and they said it's going to be a lot of training, a lot of fun. You get to do some really cool stuff that you wouldn't get to do on the civilian side, and I said, sign me up. So for the next 4 years, I actually went active duty and did full-time training, became a warrant officer, and they put me through all these different courses to become a cyber operator in the Army National Guard.
I got to hear a little bit early, so a sneak peek of your story into how you got into your organization that you're with now. Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I was getting ready to transition off of active duty after years of all this training and learning how to be a cyber operator, and I just was starting to test the waters, put a resume out on Indeed, you know, things like that, and looking at LinkedIn, and I really wasn't sure how to translate a lot of what I was doing into the civilian world. Cybersecurity seems to be a big buzzword that it's everywhere, but we don't really know how to quantify what you're doing in the military and the civilian side. And I just got really lucky that there was a company that was right here in the area that I was moving to that ran across my resume, and a lot of what they do is related. And the CEO himself called me out of the blue and said, hey, I saw your resume, and sounds like a lot of what you've done and the certifications you have check a lot of blocks, and we'd be interested in talking to you a little bit more about an opportunity. And I flew out here and had an in-person interview, and things worked out that as soon as I got off of active duty, I got a job offer. So it really was just kind of a perfect stars aligned, you know, and all that stuff. So it worked out well for me, and I was really happy to be a part of it, what we do now.
That does absolutely sound like the perfect transition, and I mean, not everyone is that lucky.
Sure.
I think, you know, a lot of people have questions about what they can do to get into the industry. Maybe they don't have experience, maybe they do have a little bit of experience, but looking at your LinkedIn, it's quite impressive. I mean, just stacked with certifications. And I would love to hear a little bit more about, I mean, you don't have to go through them all if you don't want to, but kind of where you started on the certification route, why you got them, and then what they might do for you or what someone else might think of doing.
Sure. Yeah, I really didn't know what to do initially either. When I was doing IT for the military, you know, there were some required ones that you do for DoD requirements, Security Plus, there's a lot of CompTIA certs, and I really wasn't sure where to start, so I literally just went down a list of what's entry level and then what's the highest you can get. And I started at the bottom, worked my way up. I mean, there was a lot of folks that say when you get into cybersecurity, you don't necessarily need to learn the fundamentals of networking or how to build a computer necessarily, because you're sort of when you think of it in the military, you have logisticians, and then you have the troops that go in and do the fighting. You know, you give them supplies. Well, in the military world, you think of the IT guys as creating the battle space. They create everything that you do, and then the cyber operators come in and they operate on that battle space. And I wanted to understand the fundamentals part first. I wanted to become an expert on how to build it so that I could learn how to exploit it eventually. So I started at the basic fundamentals, A+, Network+, Security+. And that really gave me a good fundamental understanding of how it worked. And then from there, I went into more advanced certifications. CISSP is a big one. You hear that as kind of the gold standard.
Okay.
That one is really good. It's not a technical cert, but it will give you a lot of management type stuff. And if you ever want to get into, especially a C-type position, C-level, CISO, that type of stuff, a lot of human resources folks are looking for that CISSP cert.
Okay.
And it can be challenging, especially if you're more of a technical type person. But I'll tell you, a lot of businesses really like that one because you understand risk management from a business management standpoint. And making those types of decisions, it gives you that sort of background that you might need. When I went through my warrant officer training to become a cyber operator, there were a lot of other certs that they offered. And the reason why the list is so long is that if they're going to put you through the training and they're going to pay for the cert, I mean, it doesn't hurt you to take it. And that's what I did. I just took every cert that I could. And it really helped out a lot. And it's not just the certification, but it was the training that led up to it that really gave me a lot of the fundamental understanding that I needed to do the job well. But the CCNA is another big one.
Okay.
There's a couple of, when I break it down to different certs, you have industry certs, and then you have vendor-based certs. Cisco has their own certs for learning how to work on a Cisco-based network, their routers and switches. If you want to get certified in networking, and that's one of the biggest vendors out there, get a Cisco cert. That's a great thing to do. And then there's also a security aspect to securing those networks as well. But if you want just a broader kind of thing, that you don't necessarily look for vendor certs, that helps kind of narrow some of that down a little bit.
That does. I mean,
Yeah.
later I'm going to ask you what all the acronyms stand for.
Okay.
So I hope you know them off the top of your head.
I'll do my best.
But if not, we're going to have to Google this.
Sure.
So is there a certification or any piece of education right now that you can say that you really lean into, that really helped you, or was it the combination of them all?
Yeah, and that's a broader question because certifications are only one piece of it. They'll help you with a resume. They'll help you get through the door of human resources when you have those certifications. But really, you got to have the experience that goes along with it. Boot camps will prepare you so much, and just to maybe pass a test. But that doesn't mean you have the fundamental understanding of what goes into that. Some of the certifications, like CISSP, for instance, they have a requirement that you have to have at least 5 years of experience, sometimes 10, in order just to get the cert. And they're kind of like vampires. It takes another CISSP to make another CISSP. So somebody has to vouch for you and basically say, I'm going to be your sponsor for your CISSP. I know you have X number of years in IT and you can probably do this job. And they sort of put their reputation on the line when they do that.
So a CISSP would not be an entry-level certification?
No, it's
Okay.
not. But it's one of those big ones that people look for, and I would strive for that one if people had the opportunity. There's many others as well, but that's probably the most worldwide known.
What's your lead up to being able, so is it strictly IT experience, your lead up to be able to get the CISSP? Are there some that you would say would be better to get beforehand to get you there, to get you to at least your foot in the door to some experience?
Right, yeah. So a Security Plus certification, which is a CompTIA cert, would give you a good lead up to it. And again, it's more technical. You'd be surprised how many people can actually take the CISSP with very minimal technical background. Mm-hmm. They may understand computers, they may have a little bit of background, but again, it's more of a management type cert and understanding risk management type stuff. I would recommend a Security Plus so that you have that fundamental understanding, and then maybe even the CASSP, which is another as CompTIA cert, which they equate with CISSP, but it's more technical than management.
I want to know about what you do on your work day to day.
Okay.
And I know we chatted a little bit earlier prior to being on camera, and this might not be something that you can fully share, but if you could give us a little bit of insight, it'd be very interesting.
Sure. For a lot of folks in the military, they understand when you have a security clearance, there's a lot of things you can't necessarily say and talk about in specific detail. But in my job, we do a lot of the same things they do in other big businesses. We make sure we secure and harden a network. I work for a smaller organization, so I get to kind of do the full stack of IT support as well as designing networks and auditing networks, making sure that they are hardened fully to keep the enemy out, adversaries in general. Enemy, I guess in the civilian sector you don't say enemy, but anyway, we make sure that not only do we create a network that is hardened and does everything it needs to be doing, providing services for your customers and your employees, but you make sure you keep the unwanted people out.
If someone wanted to get their foot in the door in an organization like yours, what would be some recommended first steps?
So definitely get all the experience you can. Figure out, really do a gut check, figure out, is cybersecurity just the buzzword that you're kind of chasing, or is it something you have a genuine interest and passion for? Because you have to really want to learn about computers, like down to a fundamental level. You got to understand how they work, how they function, and know what field in general you want to go into, because cybersecurity is so broad. There's operations of the networks themselves. You can do incident response. You can do forensic, analysis. You can do threat hunting. You can do threat emulation or red teaming, and where you go out and pen test and help somebody else audit their network. And if you don't understand where you want to go and you don't know what you don't know, it can be difficult to have a focused energy and effort, and you might find yourself going down into a course that really isn't going to help you in what you're geared towards. There's a number of different support groups out there and veteran support organizations like this one that are great. They may offer something really exciting, but if that's not what you really want to do, then it may not help you. So understand where you are, maybe sit down with somebody who is in the field and really kind of pick their brain a little bit and find out if that's something that sounds exciting to you or not. Because if it doesn't, you may not be happy in your job.
So having a mentor is important.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
Well, you talked about setting up or going into cybersecurity training in the military in 2014. And thinking back to 2014, I don't know that I had ever heard of the term cybersecurity at that point. I think 2016, it's all of a sudden, this word just came out of nowhere, and what is this? And this is really neat. And then, here in Idaho, we have a very different environment, and we're growing. I know we're just growing very fast, but could you provide some pointers or maybe some insight into what the cybersecurity field looks like in Idaho right now and where you think the opportunities are?
Sure. Cybersecurity, no matter where you are, is growing exponentially. Businesses right now, even when you're going through your MBA, they're teaching people now to incorporate budget for a cybersecurity team or a security team, not just your IT department or human resources, but security. And everybody needs it, obviously. So you'd be surprised at how many different opportunities there are out there. And it's not all, like you think of the hacking and things like that, people doing all that exciting stuff. A lot of it's just hardening a network, and it could be a very simple mom and pop shop, or it could be a very large corporation that has multiple campuses spread across multiple states. Idaho has a ton of industry here that needs support, that needs help. Government agencies need help as well, surprisingly. But there's opportunities out there if you know where to look. I'll just put it that way. But as far as where they want to start, they kind of need to figure out, do they want to be a part of a team, or do they want to be the one-stop shop, I do it all kind of thing? I come in, and that's kind of a harder place to get into without experience, obviously. You need to be able to understand everything to do that. But you can come into a larger company at somewhat I don't want to say entry level, but a little bit of experience that eventually you can work your way up and figure out where your niche is, and work your way up within that company and then lateral somewhere else easily.
Well, you gave us some really good advice earlier, but I kind of want to revisit the idea of this person that might be just starting out in the field, that might be exploring it. What is some advice that you would give to someone that is thinking about taking on cybersecurity and is probably just in their first exploratory phase?
Sure. Boot camp classes are great, but I find that those are only, they enhance your skills and experience. You need to have a little bit of fundamental understanding. So I recommend people have their own home lab. I always tell everybody, it doesn't take a lot of investment. You'd be amazed what you can do with a little Raspberry Pi. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that.
I have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to have to explain this.
So a Raspberry Pi, if anybody is not familiar with it, is just a little device you can get on the internet. It's about anywhere between $30 to $60, and it is a computer, and it's about this big, and it has everything you need to build your own computer. It has an operating system that's free and open source. You can learn how to code with Python or any number of different languages, scripting languages, and you can plug it into your TV, and all you need is a keyboard and mouse. And obviously an internet connection would be great, but you can do things without it as well. But you'd be amazed at how many free classes there are. You can find YouTube videos on how to build just about all different kinds of services that are offered on there. But even if you start at fundamental level with just a Raspberry Pi, or you have your own server that you build at home, you don't have to invest a lot of money. In going out there and teaching yourself something, you'll get so much more experience out of, and something you can leverage into the next class and find out, okay, I really want to learn a little bit more about setting up my own Exchange server and my own email server at home, something like that. And if you don't like that, go into something else. I want to design a web page. You don't have to spend a lot of money, is my bottom line. And odds are, when you go teach yourself something like that, you're going to discover something that you're really going to be interested in. And then next thing you can do is you can hack yourself, and figure out how to pen test and things like that. And you'd be amazed what you can learn and carry that into a professional career one day.
Well, I'm going to follow up with you on advice on how to set up your own home lab. I think that would be really interesting.
Sure.
But I think we've covered everything. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with that we didn't cover in the questions I asked? I know, putting you on the spot. Your turn.
No, just don't be afraid to break things. Go out there. That's how you learn. A lot of people just have, I remember my grandparents, this comes to mind, they're just afraid, their very first computer, they didn't want to delete everything. They're afraid they're going to push the wrong button. I say don't be afraid to delete everything, because that's how you're going to learn how to fix it. And when you rebuild it, then you're going to just be that much better at it, and you won't have that fear, that apprehension that a lot of people tend to get, especially when you're doing it on your own network, because who cares if you break your own network, right? It's you don't want to break your boss's network, right? So practice as much as you can at home, and break as much as you can, and then fix it, and that'll take you far.
Set up your home lab and break things.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been an absolute pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for joining us. You've really opened my eyes to a lot of different things that had no idea. Again, we're going to have to come back to those acronyms, but
Sure.
But maybe we'll put out in a blog later some tips and acronym explanations.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks.